I'm Leslie Randall. I'm a GYN oncologist. I'm the division director and the research director at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I just flew up from Richmond about 5 minutes ago, so apologize for being late. I'm so grateful and humbled and honored to be here. You guys are we do all the work that we do. You're the reason that I did 15 years of training and that I miss soccer games for my kids, and in this, seeing you organize this way and to hear all the things that you're saying makes all that worth it. That's really, why we do what we do. And I don't have any slides. I just want this opportunity to just connect with you all. I'm not going to talk long because I want to leave time for question and answers. I think the most important thing that I can say today is what you need to hear from a physician that really lives, sleeps, eats, breathes clinical trials. Adrian just gave half my talk, so I'm actually going to be really short because everything that you said was many of the things that I was actually going to say too. I trained in, let me back up. So I started my training in OBGYN in Louisville, Kentucky, and I didn't know what a clinical trial was. And I matched for my fellowship at UC Irvine, and many of you may know in the advocacy community, Dr. Desaya. So Dr. Desaya and Mary Scroggins, to me, are up here together. They're two of the biggest giants in our field ever. And Dr. Desaya brought me into his office when I was about a second-year fellow. And man, I thought I was just doing a great job. I was learning surgery. I was taking good care of patients. I really thought I was knocking it out of the park. And he sat me down and he said, Leslie, I'm really disappointed in you. What do you mean? I'm doing such a good job. And I thought, why? What did I do wrong? And he said, you haven't put any patients on clinical trial, in 3 months. What's going on? And I said, well, truth be told, I don't know that much about it. Dr. Desai, I want to make sure my patients are getting the best care possible. And I don't know what's going to happen if they go on a clinical trial. And I can't guarantee them, I can't tell them what to expect. And, he really read me the rule book, and you've heard a lot of it today. And at the end of that discussion, he said, do you want to help one person or do you want to help 10,000 people? And that's all he had to say. And if you know Dr. Desai, he had a way with words, and he could say a very small thing that would impact the rest of your entire life. So those words really energized me, and from then on, I was dedicated to clinical trials, and I learned all I could learn, and I learned that, as you said, it is the best care that a patient can receive. And really so then, as a faculty member, I started doing all this work in disparities, and we were writing paper after paper on how patients of color have worse outcomes than whites, and how the outcomes on clinical trials are the same, just like you said. And I thought, okay, clinical trials are probably the fastest way to bridge the gaps in our inequities, our health inequities for cancer outcomes. So I actually moved to Virginia and took a job in Richmond, Virginia, the former capital of the Confederacy, which has really been, it's in process of being reformed, and that's been on the front pages of papers and magazines, and many of you have seen that in the popular media. But really, clinical trials are the way that we are doing that, and we have a philosophy that is bench to community. This old scientific philosophy was bench to bedside, and you guys have heard hundreds of lectures on bench to bedside. Well, we go a step further and we say bench to community, because your research doesn't have an impact if it ends at the bedside. It has to reach the whole community. So that's what we do, and I don't know how to do that yet. We're making it up as we go. We're learning because this is a huge deficit in our medical field. So we're learning as we go. So that brings me to the topic that I'm supposed to talk about, which is decentralization of clinical trials. I thought all I had to do to bridge gaps and disparities was go to where the patients didn't have access to clinical trials. If I just plant myself there at VCU, that it would fix everything. Ha ha, as my daughter would say. So no, that didn't work. That wasn't enough, because I was in Irvine, California, where patients have money, they have food, they have a car, They probably have more than one card. They have access, and it's traffic's terrible, and it takes them a long time to get to the medical center, but they can actually get there. That was not what I encountered when I came to Richmond, Virginia. The patients in Irvine were healthy. They didn't have bad hypertension. They didn't have diabetes. They never got excluded from a clinical trial because of their health problems and their underlying health conditions. So I had to learn it's almost like I felt like I retrained. I felt like I went all the way back to medical school to see, how this was just putting myself there was just not going to work for lots and lots of reasons. But decentralization of trials means, and it's going back to that bench to community philosophy, like if I just house my trial in my ivory tower, people aren't going to know about it. They're not going to have access to it. They're not going to be offered it. And decentralization is taking the trial to the people that need it. So, it's obvious why that would be a good thing, right? And if you've ever been in a situation, I'm going to put you on the spot. How many have been in a situation where you wanted to participate in a clinical trial, but it was too far away and you just couldn't get there? Anybody? I'm one. I have migraines. In fact, those lights are about to kill me, so if you wouldn't mind to turn those down, that'd be awesome. The trial I wanted to go into is at the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona. Well, even in Southern California, even with all the money I had, I'm a doctor. Like, I can't get to the trial in Scottsdale, and it wasn't anywhere around me. And, oh, by the way, you have a certain type of migraine, so you're not eligible for the trial anyway. Okay, great. So, many of you may have experienced that. It's very frustrating as someone who's desperate to find something for treatment and be turned away for those reasons or not be able to go because of those reasons. Well, decentralization would take the trial to you. Now, here's the drawback. Here's the difficult part of decentralization, and you can imagine this. I always say that we want to Uberize clinical trials, make them easier, take them to patients, make it easier to go on a trial. But that cell phone over there on the desk, that cell phone over there got me lost. And that's why, the Uber dropped me off in the wrong place. And that's why I got here late. So, trials are no joke. Like, these are new drugs. Your safety is like our very, very top priority. So to have trials being managed in places where there aren't very specially trained physicians to monitor the safety of patients is really scary. Because we can't, you just don't want that going on anywhere. Not just any doctor is trained to handle the side effects of a new treatment. It takes a lot of years of training and a lot of experience and education to be able to do that safely. So, why don't we just train a bunch of doctors to do that? Well, actually, it's not, a lot of doctors don't want to do it. It's a lot of extra training. It's a lot of financial investment on your own part. It's a lot of lost income to do trials. It's extra work. So physicians are kind of disincentivized to do trials. Healthcare is a business. If you have a doctor, the doctors in my catchment area, if they send a patient to me for a trial, they don't get to treat them, and they lose money. Actually, that we thought that was a big barrier, but when you really go out and talk to people, it's not a big barrier. You just have to educate those folks on the trials that you have and the availability. But they still have to send them, and the patients still have to get to us, so decentralization would take that all away. So I'm going to wrap up by giving you an example. You gave the COVID vaccine as an example of how we mobilized and how fast. How fast, and how that's a miracle that got done and approved so quickly. And, the only thing I might disagree with you on is that cancer is a pandemic. And when you sit, when I sit in my office and I see usually about 30 patients a day, and, usually about a third or half of those patients are dying and without options, to me, that's like an emergency. COVID, actually, we had to decentralize our studies a little bit. So we couldn't put doctors in communities to take care of the patients, but we could connect via telehealth. And that worked fine. The problem with telehealth is the patients who it worsens disparities because the same patients who didn't have access before, they don't have an internet, they don't know how to use it, they don't have the devices, they don't have those things. So we can get them the devices, and we did, but having that internet. So hopefully, I don't want to get political, but an infrastructure change would change that and would help that. And so infrastructure bill, like that would be one benefit of, then that would make decentralizing trials possible. Most trials make you get your labs in one place, your CT scans in one place. There's no reason you can't get them outside. It's crazy. So we're actually like pushing trial sponsors, and we're getting somewhere because these things worsen health inequities, and the study sponsors are under the gun from the government and the FDA to improve health inequities. So we're actually starting to make some inroads with things like that, which, many of you in this audience have probably heard over and over and over for years and years and years, and you just can't do that, it's just not possible, blah, blah, blah. It is possible, and y'all knew that all along. That's why it's so frustrating to listen to that narrative. It is possible, it's just somebody's just got to say that, it's just got to do it and make it something that's legitimate and monitorable and safe. So, that's where I'm going to end. I welcome all your questions, and I really thank you for having me today. Thanks.
And I'm going to apologize in advance because I need to run to another meeting where I'm going to hear a little bit. We've been hearing a lot about decentralized clinical trials, and it's part of the new Moonshots relaunch. So I've got to get to an NCI meeting, a virtual meeting, and we're actually going to hear from the White House staffer about that. But so as I leave to go set up my computer in the new room, and I apologize, but. So my two questions, does anyone have any questions from the floor? And while you're thinking of coming to the microphone, I'm going to ask Dr. Randall first. You talked about, people not having the resources and whatever. What financial support programs are in place at your institution, and are clinical trial participants fast-tracked to these programs?
Sure. So thank you. So it's funny because we're working on this. Like I said, we're building that plane at 30,000 feet. We kind of have financial resources for our clinical patients, and then we have this pot of resources for our trial patients. So what we're trying to do right now is just integrate all of that. The resources that we have are mostly through American Cancer Society and some through our Cancer Center support grants. They're kind of pitiful, really. I'll tell you who provides a lot of transportation access and resources is industry. So industry is a little bit stigmatized. They get kind of a bad name, and deservedly so. But at the same time, they do provide our industry trials actually fund a lot of our transportation budgets for our patients. And right now, the patient population that I take care of, we won't open their trial unless they heavily fund that piece of it, because I can't get anyone on the trial if they don't. So we just say, this is a hard line in the sand, and we negotiate it in our contract. So there are resources out there, but they're not as organized as you would think. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
My name is Bar. I'm from Israel. I traveled all the way to be here, so thank you very much. I founded the Israeli Women's Cancer Association 9 months ago after I lost my mother to uterine cancer. We didn't have an association for gynecology, oncology in Israel, a patient advocacy one, but we do have in Israel so many for breast cancer, so I felt the need by myself when I treated my mother, and I founded the association. We are trying to do the same things that you are doing in Israel, because patients in Israel don't have the knowledge at all about the clinical trials. So we are establishing on our website a list of all the trials available in Israel. But I feel like this is not the end, and this is not what we actually need to do. And I would like to hear from you, what do you think that we should start from? Not only having the list what is available in Israel, but also what we can do more to bring in to Israel and to do even more that what is available in Israel and is very hard to achieve. And do you think that it's possible to enroll to a clinical trial in the United States, for example, using telehealth with a patient in Israel? So thank you again, and thank you.
That's a little bit of a medical question, so I can answer that if you guys want. Yeah, so thanks for your question. So it's hard to know what a lot of, in the United States, it's regulatory based. So like right now, if I want to do telehealth with a patient who's outside the United States, I'm not really licensed to provide care outside of the United States. So that would have to change. Oftentimes, I'll give advice. Someone will reach me through LinkedIn, and I'll give advice and give the caveat, like, this is not real medical care, blah, 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 even though it is. So, but right now it's a regulatory issue, and I wish Annie was still here because she needs to bring all this stuff up at this meeting, right? And, I'm so glad you brought this up because we have international trial networks, but none of us are aware of what's happening on the ground. Like, we talk about trials at a scientific level, but none of us know, like, what the barriers are in these individual countries, except for, like, some of the sort of superficial things. But that's right now the barrier for trans, country care and all the other things that I talked about with regards to like safety and whatnot. But there is a way to do it. There's always a way, right? There's always a way to do something. There is a way to do it. It just takes like breaking down these old systems.
Yeah, so if to add and to comment about what you said, myself, I was a lawyer, and I left the profession to be a team leader of research team in Tel Aviv Medical Center, just because of what happened in my own life. And I came to my professor, and I told her, Professor, maybe we, the association, will bring clinical trials to Israel. And she looked at me, and we know each other for a long time because she treated my mother, and she's my boss now. And she laughed at me, and she told me, I don't need you. Why do we need the association to help us, the physicians in Israel, to bring the clinical trials to Israel? And the medicine in Israel is quite good. I mean, yeah, it is. And they even say, we bring America to Israel. And we agree, the medicine in Israel is quite good, but not all clinical trials are in Israel, and we can enroll to, for example, for platinum-resistant ovarian cancer, it's a living hell, sorry for my language, to enroll a patient to a trial. I mean, I have no patient, and we are the biggest medical center in Tel Aviv, in Israel, with ovarian cancer patients. So that's just for example, but so what is the role of the associations in the clinical trial industry?
Well, thanks for sharing that. I think, we are all working on that. We're just getting to the point where we are collaborating and not, I don't think we were ever competitive, and we've been collaborating for a long time, but not in the way that we're doing now. Like, we're having much more like meaningful, sincere, active collaborations than we ever have in the past internationally. So I think that you're probably, hopefully, going to see that continue to change. Yeah, thanks for your comment. Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Clara McKay. I work with the World Ovarian Cancer Coalition. We're a network of 200 patient advocacy organizations from around the world. Firstly, thank you for hosting this session. It's been really interesting already, so very much looking forward to the remainder of the day. I just wanted to say, and there is a question here, but in 2018 we did a study that involved over 1,500 women living with a diagnosis of ovarian cancer, and we asked them many questions, including a question about clinical trials. And 97% of the women that responded to that question said that they would have an interest in participating in a trial, and yet only a third of those women had that conversation initiated with them, with their clinician. And I can completely understand why women don't know about clinical trials because you don't need to until you're ill. But I find it frustrating that physicians, who come through an education system, who are clearly devoted and dedicated to their patients, somehow just lack that insight and understanding of the importance of clinical trials for their patients. So I'm interested in your views about, how do we tackle that problem? Thank you.
Well, I think one thing you spoke to was just our innate lack of knowledge that these things exist. And I guess the biggest question is, when should patients be approached about the probability that they might be eligible for a clinical trial? Now, when you go in as a survivor, I know you go into your first visit and they tell you you have cancer. They give you a stack of papers to go home with, to read up on, to learn about. But nowhere in that paperwork did it say, oh, and by the way, it's probable or maybe possible that you could take part in a clinical trial, that you can be part of something beyond your cancer, beyond yourself, because someone had to take a clinical trial in order for me to get the treatment I did and survive. So would you like to be considered? Even with the consideration or consent for tissue banking. So the question is, why aren't we being approached? And how can we do this in a sensitive way so that everyone feels included, that we're not just being so gregarious about that we're just saying, okay, do you want to be a clinical trial? But no, at least be able to start the conversation. Give me the option to be a part of it. Let me tell you yes or no. But if you never ask me, I never had the chance to answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Annie, Adrian, and Leslie, for such a great discussion. It was very meaningful to hear both the patients and medical perspective of advocacy in clinical trials.